This was in the 33-foot boat. There were two of us, and we got hit by a squall. It was like a freight train, just bang.
Wow.
At 50 knots, which is 60 miles an hour. And the boat goes, and we were in the middle of a thunderstorm. We had lightning strikes all around the boat.
And there's just the two of you.
Just the two of us, yep.
Hey, I'm Greg Grunberg, and welcome to Talk About It, the podcast where we focus on topics that everybody should be talking about, and hopefully they will be. Not only talking, but screaming about.
Epilepsy shouldn't keep you from doing anything that you want to do.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
While we will continue our focus on epilepsy, of course, we will also look at other health conditions and causes. Our goal is to knock down, drag out, and eliminate stigma and raise awareness. Each episode, you're going to hear from amazing advocates and champions. You will learn, as I will, about how we can all help to make a real difference.
Talking about it is important. It's all about connecting.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Thank you for talking about it.
Thank you for talking about it.
Talk About It is sponsored by Seizures Are Signs. Seizures Are Signs is dedicated to educating those living with or caring for someone with uncontrolled seizures about the importance of early diagnosis, recognition, and treatment. To learn more, please visit seizuresaresigns.com. Seizures Are Signs is made available by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. All right, so let's jump right into this episode of Talk About It. Well, hello, and welcome to this episode of Talk About It. You know, a famous musician, Christopher Cross, once said or sang, well, it's not far down to paradise. At least it's not for me. If the wind is right, you can sail away and find tranquility. Oh, the canvas can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. Well, if you listen to those lyrics close enough, you realize that it's important to find your tranquility. And on this episode of Talk About It, we're going to meet a guy who has really found that tranquility and wants to share it with the world, and he's on a mission to do just that. His name is Phil Hayden. He is an eminent neurologist, but he's also a sailor, and an amazing sailor at that, and the most unselfish sailor you can possibly meet, because his mission at Sail for Epilepsy is to inspire people with epilepsy and their caregivers to take one more step towards achieving a fuller life. Today, we're going to hear about his incredible voyages and his amazing story and his amazing foundation, Sail for Epilepsy. Oh, and later, my buddy Adrian Pasdar, actor and sailor, is going to stop by to tell us just what it is about sailing that inspires him and gives him that tranquility. All that and so much more on Talk About It. Okay, I have wanted to have you on for so long. I've heard so much about you, first of all, because you're brilliant and you're so prominent in the epilepsy community. As you know, or don't know, our oldest son has epilepsy, and he's living well with it. But we're always looking for different cool things to associate with epilepsy. Ways to enhance your life. I mean, you and I are right on the same path. Like I'm encouraging, but certain things come with inherent danger, and especially with epilepsy or seizures or whatever. First of all, introduce yourself so everybody knows exactly who you are, and then tell me about Sail for Epilepsy.
Yeah. So I'm Phil Hayden, and I have epilepsy. On July 6th, it would be my 50th anniversary of a head injury that caused my post-traumatic epilepsy.
Congratulations.
I embrace it. And, I'm a neuroscientist. I study the brain. My focus is epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease. And I'm the chair of neuroscience at Tufts University School of Medicine. And I would say I've done it in spite of some adversity I've been through with epilepsy. Mm-hmm. And I really owe this all to my parents and my grandmother. And going back 50 years, my grandmother used to have some medical ailments, and she'd have these little self-help books, and she'd cut sentences out and stick them on the refrigerator. And one that she cut out, and all of my family remembers to this day, is "I can and I will." And so I was I had a depressed compound fracture of the skull. I lost 2-inch diameter of my skull for a year.
How did that happen?
Last day of school, I was riding my bike home, and somebody threw a house brick, and I caught it in my forehead.
Wow.
Yeah, and so within an hour, I started having tonic-clonic seizures.
Yeah.
And, the first 5 years were a real struggle. And she would remind me, "Phil, I can and I will." And on my sailboat, which we'll talk about in a moment, I have in big letters, "I can and I will." And it just reminds me of what an incredible inspiration she was to me.
I love that. That is fantastic.
And all of my family is in England, except my immediate family in the US. And we have our WhatsApp messaging group, and my uncles and my brothers, and something happens, and somebody will always say, "I can and I will."
Oh, man.
So I think these are important words we should all remember, whether we have epilepsy. We all have challenges in our life.
Yeah.
So in my first 5 years, it was an incredible challenge because I was on the second treatment for epilepsy. The first was the ketogenic diet, thousands of years ago. Yeah. But the first drug that was developed was phenobarbital. That was my medication. And I used to fall asleep in high school. And, my dad, love him, I have to. He would go to school and he would say, "Don't give him an inch." And that's what I needed. Yeah. And so, the teachers would push me through and.
Right, as opposed to sort of today, where it's give them every accommodation you can and all of that, which is fine, which is actually good. We did that for Jake, but at the same time, to hold hands too much, it doesn't give the person or the patient the ability to say, "No, I have to do that." We have this, and I'm sure you have patients that you talk to all the time about this, even in the Alzheimer's community. My mom was recently diagnosed with early onset, so I've got a lot of questions for you, but It is one of those things where I took Jake to work today, dropped him off. He shuts the door, and I hear his pills rattle in the door. And I go, whoa, 1 second. And he comes back, and I was like, "Dude, your pills." He's like, his alarm went off. He's like, "I just assumed," because we were in the car dancing and, driving to work. So he forgot to take his pills. So then I had a conversation with my wife just a half hour ago. I said, "We just need to," it's interesting because it's like, you don't want to overparent, you don't want to be on top of your spouse or your friend or whatever, but you just need to check. It's a real balance, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a real balance. It's a very delicate balance, and you've got to allow people to do their thing. But I always talk about push, but safety guardrails. Try to achieve, but make sure there are guardrails. And this is all sort of leading up to for epilepsy. So I was in hospital.
Tell me, you were in hospital.
So I was in hospital for 2 weeks, and but then I grew up in England. So what do you do in the summer? You play cricket. It's just a vertical baseball bat.
Right.
And how do I play cricket with a big piece of skull missing? And so this is really an example of my parents being so good. They got me an ice hockey helmet, so it covered where my skull was missing.
Yeah.
And we changed the rules of the game for everybody. There could be no fastballs. So what it meant, I went out and played cricket with the same rules as my mates. And so I was able to go and, play every day, but safety guardrails. And this is one of the things I try to do in epilepsy is I try to challenge people, either parents, is there something you can let your child do?
Yep.
With safety guardrails in place, or people with epilepsy, is there something you want to do, but think of the safety guardrails?
Yeah.
And this is called the one more step challenge. And is there an extra step you can take to live a fuller life? So my one more step, we're fast forwarding a few decades, is to sail the oceans of the world. But I have a large number of safety guardrails in place. There's all of the offshore sailing training. I have, speed dial on my WhatsApp when I'm offshore. I have a neurologist at Harvard. So if there's an issue, I have, my seizure card on the boat. People train, so if something happens.
Yeah.
So but I refuse to sit indoors and do nothing.
Okay, but I'm watching this footage, and Phil, it's like it's not. Let's go for a gentle sail. I mean, you've got the mast swinging, and you're ducking down, and you're doing it all. It's not like you have a crew. And you have a mate on ship, I guess, with you. But it is exciting. It's so beautiful, and I know the footage that I see at Sail for Epilepsy is it's drone, and there's beautiful, and there's another boat that got a little too close, by the way, for some of these shots. But it is gorgeous, and you're not doing it gently. You're truly enjoying every aspect. I mean, to the fullest. Sailing.
Yeah.
Can we just have a sailing conversation? Because and Nick and I talked about this before you got on. I get it when I watch the videos, and I get it when I'm on a boat, but it's like there's people that get sailing and people that go, oh, that is just too much of a pain in the butt. Like, when was it always, were there sailors and sail people in your family that did this? When did you get that bug?
Yeah, so before I had my head injury, I was a competitive whitewater kayaker.
Oh.
And then, tonic-clonic seizures, and it was like, I should back off a little bit. And, then I got on, I managed to perform eventually in academia, did okay in my job. And just as my first child was going to college, I thought, I spent my life working and being with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do some other fun stuff. You identify priorities. I said, I got to find something else to do in my life now. My kids are leaving home.
Yeah.
I got to get back to the water. So in 2007, believe it or not, that not long ago, I thought, I'm going to start taking sailing lessons. So I started taking sailing lessons. Then I moved to Boston, and I got a little boat. And in 2015, 8 years ago, I said, oh, this racing looks fun. So I started going into the racing. And then in 2017, I entered my first Bermuda race.
Wow.
And this race is called the Bermuda 1-2. So what you do is you sail, one sailor sails down,
mm-hmm.
then you recover, and two sailors race back.
Ah.
So I just did my fourth Bermuda 1-2. Started on June 2nd, so I did solo down to Bermuda, and I got third in class. So I was pretty happy.
How many boats are in the competition?
So in my class, I think there were 10 or 12 boats.
Wow.
But here's the thing I like to... The two who beat me, one's a professional sailor, one's a semi-pro, and if you add their ages up, their combined age is less than mine, so I think I'm a winner.
You are a winner, without question. But you should be considered, two sailors then, because of your age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How many boats do you lose a year in the Bermuda Triangle? Isn't that a thing?
Oh, fortunately, the triangle's off towards Florida. So we stayed well away from that.
I love that. The kids are getting out of the house, and so you're like, you know what? I got to find something. I got to do something competitive, because I'm looking into competitive eating, and I'm thinking maybe that might be the thing for me.
Coming up on Talk About It.
No, she signed up for our One More Step challenge. Her goal was to walk one city block on her own. I think it was 2 years ago, she phoned me and she said, oh, and by the way, I just walked 8 miles.
Wow. All right, I'm popping out of the interview just for a second because, Nick, I can't be the only person who appreciates, being on a boat. We both have a very good friend, Adrian Pasdar, who is in this episode talking about boating. I'm not a boat guy. Like, I love being on a boat.
Yeah.
But they say the two best days that you own a boat are buying it and selling it. Are you a boat person?
No, we would, like, if we went to a lake, we would rent a pontoon boat or something,
Yes.
which is fun.
Pontoon boat I love.
Yeah.
There's just so much. But I guess it's like my passion for cars. Once you commit, I buy an old car. It's like, all right, well, now you're either going to have a big paperweight or you're going to make the most of it.
Yeah.
And enjoy it. And I love what he has done with, obviously, Sailing for Epilepsy and his passion. But I just have never wrapped my head around. I love riding horses. I'm not going to own a horse. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, Bill Burr has a great line. He says, you never want to be the guy that owns the boat. You want to be the guy whose friend owns the boat. And then you show up with, some drinks and you're the hero. Everyone's like,
Dude, I bring a mean picnic. All right, let's go back to the interview. So take me back though, just because there's something, you represent, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but to have gone through such a traumatic brain injury and to have to deal with seizures and medication and therapy and all of that, and to accomplish what you've accomplished in your career, because we'll talk about sailing, but was it tough for you? Was learning tough, or did it not affect that part of the brain? Because I'm looking at your skull, dude. You look great. I mean, when did you put that piece back in? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So I went for a year without a skull here. You may see a few scars. I don't know. And
can't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
And so there's a year later, an alloy plate was put, Vitalium alloy plate was put in, then the bone grows back on it. But the first 5 years were a real struggle.
Yeah.
So I was falling asleep in class. So in the English system, when you're 16, you have what are called O-level exams. And there's 8 different subjects. I failed half of them, but then I went on to do the A-level. So I passed in physics, chemistry, biology, and math. And a lot of that is logic in my book. I failed French. I failed English 5 times, passed on the 6th. Failed geography, failed history. Everything you have to memorize. And so I have a lot of challenges with memory. So Greg, 15 minutes ago, I had to go in my email and check your name. Don't take that as disrespectful or anything. It's just
I'm a famous actor, Phil. Come on, just look up on the marquee. You don't have to check your computer.
Phil, I had to
there's
as
a
well.
lot of issues I have with memory. And it was really challenge learning. So I just made it into university. I mean, and then when I was at university, the first 2, so the English university is 3 years for your bachelor's degree, and it's a very focused degree.
Yeah.
My degree was in physiology, and first 2 years was really hard, but the 3rd year was experimental. It was real science, and there is a lot of intuition, instinct, logic, and then I excelled.
You clicked in, yeah.
And then I wanted to do my PhD. And my grades weren't good enough. And they said, your grades aren't good enough. And Greg, you're going to learn very quickly. When I say I'm doing something, I am doing it. As my grandmother said, I can and I will.
Right.
And I said to the professors, I don't care what you say, I'm doing a PhD. And
I love it.
I know. And, I respect them a lot. I said, look, I don't have the grades for a scholarship. I'll pay for myself. Well, what they didn't know was I didn't have the money to pay for myself. And I managed to cobble together enough money for 1 semester. And I just said, I'm going to do it and I'm going to prove it.
Right,
and the chairman of the department saw something in me, and he had me apply for a fellowship for postdoctoral studies that come after the PhD. I applied, and they said to me, well, we're really sorry, but you interviewed great, but you're not a postdoc, so we don't have a fellowship for you. But we've decided to develop the first annual scholarship for graduate studies, and we're awarding it to you retroactively.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, a message, it doesn't always happen, but a message I like to give people is I say, don't expect anything to be handed to you on a plate.
Yeah.
You have to go out and earn it.
Right.
And work hard. And it's not always going to work out, but if you don't go for it, it definitely won't work out.
Yeah, and also, people say right place, right time. Well, guess who puts you in that place at that time? It's you. So, you have to embrace the opportunities. My dad has always said, just go. That's something that my if I have a meeting that's somebody says, I want to meet you, I'm 80 miles away, there's traffic, it's terrible, but I know I'm interested, I don't know where it's going to lead. You never know. You get there, someone else is there, or you talk about something and suddenly that clicks. It's amazing how that can happen. I just met with a guy to do a project because Nick and I, we have a studio together and in North Hollywood. And this guy comes in and we're meeting on a project. And I said, tell me about your history. And he said, oh, you know what? I actually created this app that I abandoned in 2015 because it just didn't catch fire. I said, what was it? He said, it's a dating app for people with disabilities. And I was like, what? and it's brilliant, and it's built, and it's sitting dormant, and we're going to take it and revive it and help people with all
nice.
conditions.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I hadn't had that conversation, who knows?
Right.
So I love that. What do you come across people where you see potential in a patient, and because obviously you had parents that were encouraging and never said, no, I know you want to do it, but a PhD, you can't do that. I mean, they obviously, helped you break down those doors or encouraged you, correct?
Yeah.
So what happens when you're in a position where you see a caregiver who just, is being too cautious, is being too much of a helicopter parent or spouse or friend? How do you deal with that? And do you cross that line? Do you feel that's part of your job?
So I think an important part of my job, I never tell people what to do. I just try to give examples. For example, as a parent, we always want to put our kids in bubble wrap. And so if you have a kid with epilepsy, you put an extra layer of bubble wrap. And I say to them, well, why don't you just peel it back a little bit? And I just tell stories about other people.
Oh, yeah.
So, one story. So I work a lot with the Epilepsy Foundation of New England. And I was at one of their sailing camps. And I was talking to a mother, and she was talking with me. She said, my daughter came to me and said, I want to go in this sailing camp. And I said, no. And I said, no. And I said, no. And eventually she said, yes. And in the camp, they have all the safety guardrails in place. And people who have epilepsy are on the boat, and people who don't have epilepsy, they have the same safety guardrails. So there's no two classes of people. At the end, so during the week, the daughter had a tonic-clonic seizure on the boat and was fine. Mm-hmm. At the end of the week, she came to her mom and said, you are the best mom in the whole wide world. And so I give little stories like this about.
I love that.
How then there's somebody you may know of, Chandler Gunn, who was a former Olympian.
Yeah.
And she signed up for our One More Step challenge. Her goal was to walk one city block on her own. So she talked to her neurologist and her partner, and they figured out a way. And I can see the city block she walked down. She was on one side of the road. Her partner was on the other side. Safety guardrails.
Yeah.
She did it. And then I think it was 2 years ago, just before I was off on one of my races, she phoned me, because we do Facebook Lives at the beginning of the races, so that people with epilepsy can tune in, and I try to bring them along as virtual shipmates.
Yeah.
She phoned me and she said, Phil, we're having a Facebook watch party tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, I just walked 8 miles.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I just share stories. There's another, I think he's 18, Lee. He's had a lot of seizures and been having a real challenge. His one more step was he decided he wanted to ride his bicycle again. Mm-hmm. Well, he had lost a lot of balance. And so his parents worked with him. They got him a tricycle. And now we got videos of him riding his tricycle. Yeah. So I think let's identify what is it you're going to try to achieve.
Yeah.
Then figure out ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to set the bar really high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's fine. You may not achieve it, but you've striven towards that goal.
Yeah. If people haven't heard the episode with my son, because I'm such a proud dad, Jake, we sat down with Jake and DJ Hoppa, and we actually heard Jake's story for the first time in his own words, and my words too. I talked way too much, but he lays out how he got his second-degree black belt, and I remember him failing his first test, which a lot of people do anyway. It's very difficult, but how he remembers. His recall is a little difficult. He had an F1 resection. He had a trauma when he was in high school. Yeah. He fell and hit his head, and we almost lost him. He had brain bleed, and saved him from that. And so he's, you can't tell with Jake until you deeper in a conversation. You go, oh, he doesn't know that part of history. So his recall on that stuff is tough. But when it comes to, I don't know, it's not necessarily muscle memory, but it is remembering the steps to what he needs to do. It's that repetition. That's why he plays. Nick and I and a bunch of celebrities, we have a band, and he plays the bongos, and it's that repetitive sort of thing. He gets it. He can do it. So I don't know. You know more about the brain than I do, but it's interesting how what you said where, you know, you had difficult with certain things, but when you found your thing and you clicked in, boom, sky's the limit.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have lots of people in the One More Step challenge, and let's advertise. Sail for Epilepsy, One More Step. Come join us.
Yeah.
We have people in 18 countries who signed up for the One More Step challenge. Caregivers, physicians, people with epilepsy.
I love it.
And we travel all around. I mean, last year we sailed across the Atlantic into Portugal, Morocco. We're on the East Coast. We're going to be doing some West Coast cities this year. And we just get together. And what I like to do is two major things. One, educate people about epilepsy. Mm-hmm. Morocco was fascinating in terms of beliefs there.
Yeah.
But I go to a high school in Morocco, where it's a French high school, and you get into their foreign language component, and then I can speak English, and their teacher loves it. Right? And so we taught them about my journey, about epilepsy, and seizure first aid. Mm-hmm. And we then challenged those kids. We said, okay, now go and amplify the message. And so they made contact with 3,500 people to amplify the message. Of course, in addition to that, given their age demographic, they use social media, and the content went all over. So one thing is about education and trying to reduce stigma. Mm-hmm. But the second is, let's just challenge people to live a fuller life.
Yeah.
And had a great story in Portugal. It was in Lisbon, and a neurosurgeon, he was there. He helped us coordinate the trip. And he had one of his patients who he'd performed surgery on for her epilepsy. And he said, oh, come on, you got to do the One More Step. And she just said, 20 minutes she was sitting. And then she got her card out and she wrote. And what she wrote down, I'm going to learn to ride a horse, and I am going to win the gold medal for Portugal in the Olympics.
Okay, now that right away you go, okay, what about a realistic list? Let's do a realistic goal. You know what I mean? That would be your initial reaction.
But he totally embraced it. And, he said, okay, so what's your first step? So it's okay. Got to figure out how I can learn to ride a horse. And,
wow.
And, and now she's going away, and I'm still in contact with them, and we see what happens. But she has some purpose in her life that wasn't there before.
Yeah, I love it. Nick is a very, very accomplished singer-songwriter, musician. Nick, when going back, like when you're challenging yourself to learn, I mean, you play the drums, you play the bass, you play the guitar, you play the keyboards, you sing. Do you remember how you would get to a place and you would sort of not master, but you'd feel real comfortable on one instrument, and then you're like, oh, I got to start over, because it's daunting.
I love the challenge, which is why I ended up learning so many instruments, because I get frustrated with, like right now it's violin. It will irritate me almost physiologically that I can't do the thing that I am hearing.
What I like is that, Phil, what you do. I don't know how you feel when people celebrate being seizure free for 6 months or 8 months or a year. I understand it, but we've been through so many moments where. And I'm just getting from you, Nick, where you're saying like you and then now it's a fallback, and it's like, because it's wonderful to celebrate those milestones, but at the same time you're kind of setting yourself up for that moment when you go, oh, and we've been through it with Jake, where he's like, oh, because he wants to drive, so he goes, okay, I've been 6 months, and then he'll have a breakthrough in the morning, because Jake has from sleep to wake, it's that sort of transition in the morning where he will have a seizure, and it's frustrating. And I don't know. Do you encourage people to celebrate any and all milestones? Because I do, but that's
absolutely.
One. Yeah.
Yeah, you should celebrate everything you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And that one step, celebrate it. Even if your goal is 100, you're making progress. Right? Yeah. And for some people, it's getting out of the bed in the morning.
Right.
Right, and that's a huge step.
Yeah, it is. And those victories, that's one thing that we also talk about is we get to celebrate things other people don't. People that just live their lives, and good for them. I mean, that they don't have to celebrate waking up and being sharp and getting a good night's sleep. Like that's something they take for granted, or I'm a little groggy today, whatever. I see Jake in the morning, I'm like, dude, you look amazing. And then we play backgammon first thing in the morning while over breakfast and get the brain going, and it's just awesome.
What a great game.
Oh, I love it. I will destroy you, Phil. Don't even go there. I mean, destroy you. I love it.
Okay, you're on.
Coming up on Talk About It.
I think about having a seizure every day,
Yeah.
even though I've been medically controlled for over 40 years.
Yeah.
And there are people who are way less fortunate in their seizure control than I am. They just inspire me, their bravery. It's just incredible.
What's up, Aid? How are you?
What's up, my brother?
Hey, I'm good. I didn't know who else to turn to because I do have friends that have boats, but you have taken me on your boat. I've seen the boat. I know how much you enjoy sailing, and I just had the most incredible guest in this episode. We're going to go back to him, but he's got Sailing for Epilepsy, and it's just such a wonderful thing that he's doing, and I just wanted to get your perspective on why you ever bought a boat, why you love sailing, why you've gone these long distances and treacherous waters and everything. That we can get into it when I want to have you on as a guest on the show, but just tell me, what is it about sailing for you?
I think, for me, it's always been about the freedom. I mean, it sounds, it sounds like an obvious answer, but once you're out there and you slip the bonds of this surly earth, you get faced with the enormity of infinity, it seems. When I sailed to Hawaii, there was a moment where we were 1,500 miles from here and from Hawaii, really in the middle, and there's nothing around you but this emptiness, which oddly enough has a fullness to it. And I think that for anybody, going through, epilepsy and all the things that are required of a patient for that you've told me about with Jake, and it's just the simplest way of clearing your head that I've ever found. Just getting off the coast, even a couple of miles. It's a wonderfully rejuvenating, spirit-filling time. It's
know what also I think is interesting is even not being a boat owner or even a boat, a sailor or going. I have so fondly, even sitting on your boat in the marina, like it takes me back. I smile when I think of it. It's relaxing. You know how, like, I guess therapists or people will say, close your eyes and take yourself to a place like a really happy thing. It's like a beach or something to calm yourself and relax. I know Jake has that. So that's what that is for you. And it's
very baptismal in a way, not to go off on a bent, but it's like there's something purifying about the water and very healing about the salt air. Again, it's a simple response. You might have been hoping for more.
No, this is what I wanted to hear.
But it's just the beauty of the silence and the all the life that's underneath the fish that you never see.
Oh, yeah.
It's just an amazing. On the way out there, I didn't see one boat, one plane, one fish, or one bird on the way to Hawaii. It was devoid of all that.
I don't understand. You're describing all the things that I would think you would see.
No, you didn't. It was funny because I was doing these calls with my kids' class, third grade class at the time. I'd check in with them every day.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to know if I'd seen whales. And I was like, as a sailor, it's the absolute last thing you want to see.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that would be
exciting.
I had
to be like, not yet.
That would be bad news.
Especially the orcas.
Yeah, I mean, you hit a whale, it's
right?
massive.
Exactly.
You don't want to see a whale, but I didn't see any planes. There's no noise pollution. There's none of that stuff, and it's just a beautiful calming. It forces you to get back into yourself, and the healing begins. No matter what you're bringing onto the boat, you always leave with something else.
So if you're listening to this and you're watching the podcast, take from this that you need to find your boat. Find what it is for you that gives you that solace. And that is not just as a patient, but as a caregiver.
That's what I mean. All walks of life. It's finding your woodworking, finding your musical instrument, finding your passion, your peace, and something that gives you some solitude. And like I said, I can't stress it enough. You always leave with something when you walk off a boat that you did not have when you stepped on it.
So if I took what you just said and I removed the word boat and I put in the action figures band, it would be the same for me.
It would be the exact same.
When we get together, but when we get together, that is my boat. I get to play music. So you're right. Find what it is that gives you that feeling that you can return to and that you can count on. I encourage people. I love you, buddy. Thank you so much.
You too, Greg.
And you did. Nick, you heard him. He said he would be a guest on Talk About It.
I did hear that. Yes.
Okay, good. All right, we're going back to this interview.
See you guys.
Okay, Phil, I have to ask you. So I'm looking at these the clips and the videos and everything, and it's just so beautiful. I mean, honestly, it's an escape for me to watch, which I love that you're asking people to just join up, make a little donation, or let us put your name on the boat so you're a part of this. You're virtually sailing with us. Yeah. But to sail the Atlantic, to go the distances that you've gone and you continue to go, it's a 30-foot sailboat?
Yeah, so it depends on the trip. So when we did the Atlantic, it was a 50-foot sailboat. So it was a little bigger.
Okay.
And I had a crew of 4 to 5. And Greg, the important thing I'm trying to teach people, again, is safety guardrails. So in crossing the Atlantic, I have to do it differently than if I'm sailing out of Boston Harbor. And so, we evaluate all the risks, what guardrails can we put in place, and then we go do it. And most of the time it's wonderful.
Right. So that's what I want to get to. Tell me about a scary moment. Tell me something where you were like, we need bigger guardrails. I mean, because I have a friend, both of us, Nick and I, Adrian Pasdar, and he sails, and he sailed from LA to Hawaii. And I mean, in the middle of the night, the whole sailboat, like the mast touched the water. It was crazy. What have you experienced like that?
Okay, let's go back to last Saturday.
Not very far.
A fresh story.
Just over a week ago.
Okay.
And I was coming back from Bermuda. This was in the 33-foot boat. There were 2 of us. And we were maybe 36 hours out of Bermuda. And we're looking over to the port side, and God, those clouds look pretty heavy. So, you shorten down the sails. And we got hit by a squall. It was like a freight train, just bang. And we went so a knot is about 1.2 miles an hour.
Okay.
So we went from 5 knots up to 50 knots of wind, like this.
Wow.
Yeah, and we shorten sail, and the boat goes.
How do you handle that when you're hit with such a? Now I know you shorten the sail, but that doesn't do. I mean, still. You're at the mercy of the wind, right? Well,
there were 2 answers to that. There's the truth and there's the lie.
You're like, is my wife listening?
Yeah. So
never let the truth get in the way of a good answer.
Exactly. So we also have we have life vest, but also a tether, and the tether you're tied on, and so I know if the boat goes over on its side, I'm not falling in the ocean.
Right.
So that just takes then you can be saying, okay, now I'm just going to try and control the boat.
Yeah.
And this squall was about 10 minutes. And 5 minutes into it, you're thinking, okay, it's going to be over soon, isn't it?
Yeah.
And 7 minutes, like,
right.
And you're gripping on, and you're just doing what you got to do.
It's the perfect storm. Yeah.
And then when the squall's over, you look back and say, that was fun.
Right, of course. Looking back, yeah. I mean, it's the perfect storm, and this too shall pass. It's going to pass, right?
It's going to pass. And we were in the middle of a thunderstorm. We had lightning strikes all around the boat. It felt like the rain was an inch in diameter, and it's just smacking into your skin.
Wow!
At 50 knots, which is 60 miles an hour, and
there's just the 2 of you.
Just the 2 of us. Yep.
Wow! And how do you keep your footing? I mean, do you slip, and then luckily you have that you're connected to the tether?
No, so we got some footrests which sort of incline, so your feet are on them, and as you heel over, they're not strapped in, but you got specific footrests. So the boat is incredibly designed for this type of sailing, for safety, but still you're on the edge.
Unbelievable. You are Captain Jack. To me, that's. I mean,
Greg, I've been called many things.
I bet.
I imagine Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, where he's like, "Is that all you got?" Up on the crow's nest.
Exactly. Bring it on.
No, that was enough.
Let me pick your brain, because I just saw something. Pun intended. I saw something on PBS. It was a KCET thing. It was a guy. I forgot his name. But he's world-renowned in scanning the brain and brain supplements and things you can do to really help your brain. What, I mean, look right here. I've got walnuts and pumpkin seeds that I'm eating. I had a Brazilian, because my mom has early onset.
Yeah.
And Jake is taking, takes 5 meds. And it's, what can people do, or what do you encourage people to do in addition to, staying on the regimen, trusting their physician, and taking their medication on time and doing their therapies? What supplements, what in addition do you recommend for people?
So for me, I would say the single most important thing we all do is try to get sleep. Sleep is, sleep deprivation and stress are triggers for seizures, especially with some people.
I would say most people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for people with epilepsy, getting enough sleep is really, really important. Mm-hmm. But for people who don't have epilepsy, sleep is critical.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. So about 10 to 15 years ago, a new pathway in the brain was identified. It's called a glymphatic pathway. And what this is essentially it's a flush for the brain. And it's only active when you sleep. And it flushes through the brain and clears toxins out.
Wow.
So if you think in a lifetime, you want to keep your brain clean.
Yeah.
So every time you can go to sleep, you can wash it and clear things out. So I now, for the last 10 years, after I learned about this pathway, I really religiously regulate my sleep. Mm-hmm. And I try to get to bed. Well, I get to bed earlier and earlier as I age. I get to bed and I try to get my 8 hours of sleep every night.
8 hours. Yeah, that's great.
I try. But, sometimes, I wake at 3 o'clock in the morning and my brain's going on something. And what I find most effective, don't stay in bed and just try to sleep through your brain being active. I just get up and I read, I do something for 45 minutes. Then I go back to bed. I can go to sleep.
Yeah.
So I think a really important thing is to try to sleep.
Yeah.
And towards that goal, I don't take any caffeine after noon.
Yep. Afternoon.
Okay. Afternoon. It takes a long time to wash out of your body, and it really reduces your ability to sleep.
Okay, that's a huge one right there.
And afternoon naps are okay, by the way. I'm a religious napper. I try at 2 o'clock not to have an appointment, except today. 2 o'clock is my 20-minute nap time. But don't have a nap late in the day because then you won't sleep properly at night.
Right.
So
don't have too long of a nap, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Just short nap. But for me, sleep is a key thing.
So you're sailing, you're napping. You're the laziest guy I know in the world. I mean, you're just. Do you love yacht rock, or can I just assume that?
I just appreciate the accolade of being a lazy person.
I'm right there with you. I am right there with you. I think what you're saying is just so important. It's the major things we can control in our life. We all know the right things to do. You've got to get enough sleep. You have to eat right. And especially over 50, I know it's all about 90% of it is what you put in your body, obviously.
Yeah.
So healthy, and then exercise to get the heart pumping, to get all that going.
Right.
All right, so let's talk Sail for Epilepsy and how you saw a response, because this is this is something you love to do. You get energy from it. It's exciting. You're getting better and better at it back in the day. And then when did it click that, wow, I could make this a fundraising effort. I could really help more people.
So 2011. So I used to be on a medication. I had a massive allergic reaction. I don't know if you know, this can cause something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome.
No.
And it has a 50% fatality rate if you get the allergic reaction. So I was in hospital for a while. And it's generally when you take it new, you get the reaction. But I just traveled around the world doing some speaking engagements, and they think I picked up a virus. And I was laying in bed recovering. I thought, I've had a successful career. I've been really lucky. And maybe it's time to give back and try and help other people.
Nice.
So I just sort of started conjuring up this idea, and it took several years to develop. And then I worked with a couple of sailing buddies who are, they're retired, and their role in life now is to give back and help other people. So we noodled around the concepts, and then in 2019, We became a 501c3 organization with their help.
Yep.
And we've then been slowly developing who we are and what is our identity. And, the major one is the One More Step Challenge. And there are so many people that, I am inspired by these people and their bravery. And, I'm just so lucky. I have medically controlled epilepsy.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't know is I think about having a seizure every day,
Yeah.
even though I've been medically controlled for over 40 years.
Yeah.
I remember seizures like they were yesterday. So, and there were people who are way less fortunate in their seizure control than I am. And they just inspire me, their bravery. It's just incredible.
And that is so true. It's something that you live with. I live in California. I always have in the back of my mind, an earthquake could strike at any time. It doesn't stop me from doing anything. Yeah. I don't think about it. It doesn't paralyze me or but it is there. It doesn't go away. And that's when I look at my son and others like him and you, and I just say, there's a side of everybody that just wants to bury their head in the sand and say, okay, well, I can't do certain things. I can't. And you're just encouraging everyone to just go out and find that one thing, one more step, because one step leads to another,
Exactly.
So where can people go right now if they want to not only learn about the, One More Step Challenge, but also hear other stories of people?
Yeah. So on our website, which is sailforepilepsy.org, and that's either totally spelled out, Sail for Epilepsy, or it's Sail #4 Epilepsy. Go to the website, and in there you'll be able to find One More Step Challenge, virtual shipmates, and then we have hundreds of virtual shipmates. It's got people's pictures, people's stories. There's a global map that's got pins where everybody's located.
Wow.
Then on social media, hashtag Sail for Epilepsy, again, spelt out or with the number 4. Follow us. And, we're constantly putting content out. And whether the content might be, something that somebody's done, or there's an upcoming event. And for example, in New Hampshire on July 15th, there's a sailboat in the river in New Hampshire, at Portsmouth. And we're setting up this event on this big boat, free of charge to people with epilepsy. Just sign up, come along. We'll take you for a sail in the river. And what I like to do is I like to get people together. Because so often we with epilepsy are on our own.
Yes.
And what's fantastic is when people come together, they start sharing their stories.
What's the name of the podcast? What's the name of the podcast? Talk about it. I mean, this is what we do. Yeah.
So I was in Porto, when I set across the Atlantic, and we had an event at one of the docks. And there was about 25 people came along, and we share stories. We do activity, sailing stuff and make flags. All of the adults there had never met. They started sharing their phone numbers. They put together their own epilepsy support group, and since then they're meeting one another.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do a series called The Caregiver. People can go to thecaregiverseries.com.
Yeah.
And it's just, and by the way, you're never going to find a story that's exactly yours. You're never going to look into a mirror. No two situations, no two people have the exact same life, and they're not affected the same way by epilepsy, seizures, Alzheimer's, whatever it is. So don't expect that, but know that it's everything is relatable. So I'm hearing your story. I'm taking things from that. I'm going to talk to Jake. We have a huge community, whether you're a part of it yet or not, and you're not alone. You're just not alone.
Totally not alone.
Yeah.
And one of the mistaken things I believe about epilepsy is it's not epilepsy. It's the epilepsies. And as you say, everyone is slightly different.
Yeah.
There are many different causes. Like me, it's traumatic brain injury. I had a brain injury in a certain part of the brain. Somebody else might have it in another part of the brain.
Yeah.
There are genetics and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so we all present with our seizures in different ways.
Yeah.
And so we're all different. But the one thing that's in common, we have epilepsy and we have seizures.
Yeah.
And we can talk to one another and listen to one another and appreciate it.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I cannot thank you enough. I know how busy you are for taking the time and talking with us. You're an amazing person. You're inspiring, and I know you don't want to hear that. You're like, whatever, I'm doing my thing. I'm the same way. But I really, it's so wonderful, and I'm so glad we finally got you on the podcast.
Yeah.
And so we'll have links to everything. We're going to post everything. But if you ever need me for anything, if you ever need me to amplify a message or whatever, you have my contact. I'm here for you, and hopefully I can get on the boat with you soon.
Greg, fly out to Boston. I'll take you sailing.
Awesome.
You come too, Nick.
No, Nick.
I cannot wait. I would love to do that.
Nick, remember on the Titanic, they had those guys playing the violin? Okay. You better learn the violin. Okay. I'm not saying it's the Titanic. I'm just saying.
The second I start,
No
you'll be like,
violins allowed on the boat.
no, believe me,
let me
if I played the violin, you would wish that the boat was sinking.
So just before we, summarize, Greg, so the boat I'm currently sailing,
Yeah.
we named it very specifically for the community. We called it Fearless, not to be reckless,
Yeah.
but because so many people are scared to do things. And so I have the boat, and I have about 500 virtual shipmate names on the boat.
Wow.
I sail for them.
Yeah.
And the idea is overcome your fears.
Yeah.
Try to take that one more step, because one step leads to 2 to 10 to 100.
Absolutely. And even if you split up those two words, fear less.
Agreed.
Don't fear more, fear less. I love it. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We have a lot more to talk about, so maybe we'll do another episode down the road. But again, I really thank you for what you're doing, and I can't wait to collaborate more in the future.
I look forward to Greg and Nick. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of Talk About It. Remember, we're all human. We're all dealing with something, and a little compassion every day can change so many lives. Thank you to our special guests. Special thanks to our sponsor, seizuresaresigns.com. Thank you to J.J. Abrams for our theme music. Thank you to Nick Marzak for producing, directing, editing, and incidental music. On behalf of my fellow producers, Phil Gattone, Ken Lohenberg, and Nick Marzak, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you're not watching, go to talkaboutitonvideo.com to watch these episodes. They're now on video as well. I'm Greg Grunberg. Don't forget to talk about it, and I will see you next time. This podcast is a production of the Talk About It Company.